join me in welcoming Ms. ROLAKE AKINKUGBE-FILANI.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. Wow, to be speaking at the platform. How's everybody doing? Okay, so today I'm going to be giving an alternative approach. And you can see the picture of. So keep that image in your mind as we go along. It should be. So the story really begins in 2019 through a confluence of factors. About 8 months after I had a baby, I decided to exit the structured corporate environment of investment banking at a point when I realized my strengths and skills were being underutilized. This is not to say that the firm I worked for wasn't giving me what I needed, but sometimes you do outgrow your environment. And human beings evolve, right? Our skills, our interests also evolve. And what may have been suited for a certain time no longer becomes as relevant. When that happens, if there are no internal pivot opportunities, sometimes you have to take a tough decision. And here are some of the key realizations leaving full-time work in 2019. The first is that I was craving a level of autonomy in my daily schedule. I hope this is still working because I just clicked. I was craving a level of autonomy in my daily schedule and my work routine. The second was that I had invested approximately almost $200,000 in an executive MBA. And everybody who knows that if you make an investment, you expect a return on that investment. I expected a return on that investment, and I wasn't going to get it in that environment. The third is that the skills, the knowledge, and everything that I had gained had positioned me for a new type of role that I could not find in my environment at the time. And more interestingly, I'm sure there are many people who've been in my shoes in this regard. In the years before that decision, there was no obvious pattern to the types of roles that headhunters were approaching me for. Now, if you're a naturally confident business person, if someone approaches you one day and says, oh, we're looking for a medical doctor, the next day they approach you, they say, we're looking for a chess player, how would you feel? Those weren't the roles I was approached for, but you get the picture. And at one point, a bit of angst, I'll be honest, because sometimes I felt a bit insecure, and I said to myself, am I not passing the right message across in my CV? The fifth point was that I seemed to thrive in diverse settings: artistic, creative, technical, cerebral, multicultural, strategic, policy, name it. And I felt I'd built enough of a profile and a track record in my core space, which is energy and infrastructure, to be in with the chance of securing an independent consulting gig or potentially becoming an entrepreneur. How many of you can resonate with some of these patterns? Yeah. More importantly, I had greater clarity on what my non-negotiables were. So I knew that if I was going to go back into full-time work, there were just certain asks and requirements that had to be. And there was a very interesting realization. I realized that my happy place was where I was combining and exploring all my passions and also using my non-technical skill set. So here was I, the end of 2019. I just discovered a new happier equilibrium that I didn't want to lose by accepting a new job, a new 9-to-5. So any role I was taking on had to combine several key elements. And then it dawned on me I would enjoy a corporate environment with a strong entrepreneurial drive, where I had some flexibility to influence the overall corporate agenda and strategy and pursue a path of what we all now know to be intrapreneurship. Bingo. I had finally landed the answer, the light bulb moment. I'm having difficulties with this pointer. The light bulb moment we all have. And of course, they often tell us entrepreneurship is thinking outside the box, innovate, create wild products and services, break the mold within your next organization. But I also quickly realized that the path wasn't as I thought. And I soon discovered a whole new meaning to the idea of. Today, I'd like to introduce you to an idea I call cracking the box, an alternative approach to corporate entrepreneurship. Journey with me. Years ago, I was journeying through Charles de Gaulle Airport in France, and I remember coming across one of these big digital billboards. And one thing particularly struck me. There was a particular phrase, I believe it was an advert for a watch or something, one of these jewelry or luxury goods. And the word says, in French, "Pour casser les règles, il faut d'abord les maîtriser." Literally translated in English, it means to break the rules, you must first master them. I'm going to need the prompter to move just as fast as I am because I'm not sure this is working. The question then becomes, what are the rules? And the question I ask you is, what are the rules in the corporate world? So there are two basic precepts I want to set out first. In the corporate world, I like to think of rules in two ways. The first is, most corporate environments have what we call structures, rules, policies, procedures, the things that you live by, that guide you. Written down law. If you break it, you'll face a disciplinary committee. But there's another very important set of rules, which is the gray areas, if you like. I call them the culture or the practice. It is a set of behaviors and practices which are not in policy, but which define how the system works. I think most people understand that. So in my mind, cracking the glass box means navigating the world of corporate policy, the laid down rules, in such a way that you're able to shape culture, which becomes accepted practice, and then which may or may not ultimately lead to a change in policy. So, what glass boxes are we cracking? Cracking the glass box also means being intrapreneurial. Think of the image of the glass box that's cracked. In fact, if you think about it, entrepreneurship can be so potent that it starts to shape and define culture, so much so that policy almost becomes secondary. So let me give you a very simple practical example. Imagine a woman who wants to go on maternity leave, and there's a stated policy that maternity leave is 3 months. That's a statutory policy. But here comes along a corporate innovator who breaks the mold, manages to get a new type of thinking around maternity policy that includes additional months for women who desire it. That person has set and shaped a new culture which may not exist on paper, but has now become practice. So I also want you to think about entrepreneurship almost like a force field. It's almost always in resistance to something or a set of practices. But guess what? It doesn't actually break the box. So, what are these cracks of entrepreneurship that I discovered in that post-2019 era? Very, very. The first box that I cracked, or the first crack in that box, was the idea that you can carve an unconventional career path for yourself in a structured corporate environment. I work for a highly, highly conservative banking brand. Anybody who knows the brand I'm talking about, right? Very conservative banking brand. But somehow today, I have a work structure that on Saturdays allows me to host a weekly business program on Arise News called Business Week. Right from the very beginning of the conversation, when I was being headhunted in March 2023 with key principals of the bank, the MD and the chairman, I was very clear about articulating my value and what I brought to the table at the onset. And that gave me some negotiating leverage as far as my work structure was concerned. I wanted to be able to run a 9-to-5 and still have time to pursue my interests in media and communication. Now, I have to be clear, this is not about having a side hustle. So back in December 2022, when I got the opportunity to anchor this program, the light bulb moment came. What better way to express one of my core talents and skills talking about business and economy, anchoring a business program, and telling African business stories, which was a clear passion of mine, and then combine it with a role that was ultimately market-facing. But in order to be able to do this successfully and allow my very conservative banking brand to find this acceptable, there were three things I needed to be aware of. The first one was around alignment of my passion or the problem I was solving with corporate objectives and strategy. I work in an investor relations role, which is very outward-facing. You're constantly communicating with investor community, our equity stories to the capital markets, and global and local investors. I can't think of a better complementarity between my media endeavor. But to do this, you have to embrace and understand your corporate objectives and value proposition. And if you think about those corporate objectives and value proposition as a glass box, that's the first way to crack it. The second part of it is really around seasonality and flexibility, recognition that the black box may need to take priority in specific seasons and at the specific times where your deliverables are at stake. This may also mean being willing to play by some rules as trade-offs for some cracks. Are you following me? And the other thing I soon discovered was that you should never say in a personal capacity what you might not say in a professional capacity, which brings me to my final point on cracking the first box, brand ambassadorship. Acknowledging that while this serious non-work endeavor is being done in a personal capacity, by virtue of concentration, I'm still a representation of my 9-to-5 corporate brand. And so what I do or say can be taken out of context or attributed to that brand, even when I'm not functioning in that capacity. The second crack is this idea that you can redefine 21st century corporate identity. The box naturally assumes that corporate identity is static, but the crack doesn't. The lone intrapreneur who's bold enough to stand out, step out, and define culture is reshaping both how senior executives and external parties perceive a typical staff member. And then this is one I really like, the third crack. The fact that when you solve problems as an intrapreneur, you're not only delivering solutions, but you're connecting people and resources. Intrapreneurs actually create new systems. They create value, whether that's connecting people, connecting resources. They have to steward, they have to be accountable, they have to think out of scope. They have to allocate scarce resources. They have to create opportunities. About 3 or 4 years ago, when I joined my previous employer, a subsidiary of ARM Group, they didn't have a corporate women's network. Drawing on the energy and passion of a young, mostly Gen Z crowd, and seeing the need to give this demographic ownership of an initiative that will make them feel empowered, I led the establishment of the first Mixed Africa Women's Network, and it held its first event in March 2021. And 2 weeks ago, I received a message from a member of the Women Committee, which I had set up, saying, for IWD, the Women Committee planned a week full of activities, and we ended with a celebration today. Just wanted to let you know that your legacy still lives on in women. Thank you, and we missed you today. The fourth crack is really around demystifying and navigating hierarchy. Intrapreneurs should be excellent at navigating hierarchy. Remember what I said about policy. There's a stated policy and a stated way to do things. But intrapreneurs understand that the levers of influence are always not so apparent. And there's subtle ways you can do this. When I joined my highly conservative banking brand, they put me in this corner office, which was very nice, but I realized that there was a risk of me building a sort of enclave as a new member in a team that generally did not bring in outsiders. So one of the ways, God-given wisdom, I must say, that I thought I would navigate this was to pursue a literal open door policy. And I remember the very first day I did this, everybody thought there was something wrong, and people kept coming to my office to close the door. And I had to keep telling them, no, I left it open for a reason. And that was very important signaling, because the message it sent out to people in the environment around me on the open floor was that, feel free to walk in. And then the fifth crack is really competing to collaborate. Collaboration, as they say, is a new competition. We all know that entrepreneurs are never always the smartest. They've learned to collaborate to achieve optimum outcomes. And I think this is an important one we all need to build. And by far, one I think is the most important is embracing process, not just outcomes. There's a dictionary definition of entrepreneurship, the Cambridge definition. The first one says, an entrepreneur is an employee who takes direct responsibility for turning an idea into a new product or service. But there's another definition which I actually prefer. It says an entrepreneur brings entrepreneurial thinking and skills to build within the structure of an existing organization. As a society today, we have a tendency to be obsessed with destinations and end goals, looking for the product that made money, the new venture that broke the internet, that we often fail to daily bask in the process. And if you think about it, how many times do you hear of entrepreneurs that their startup failed? But guess what? Through building that startup, through going through the motions, through hiring people, they go through process. And here's an even more radical idea. What if you are the product? Another short story, still at my previous employer. There was a customer appreciation gala that they wanted to put on to say thank you to customers who had bought into our projects. And they were looking for content around the appreciation gala, something that would captivate the crowd, and we were putting all these ideas. And I had another light bulb moment. At the point, it was only my immediate boss that knew I was a piano player. So I went to him and I said, Mr. Ali, what do you think about me performing with the rest of the band? And he was like, great idea. And you know what I said about the beginning and about my 2019 moment, where I thought I would thrive in an environment that also leveraged not just my hardcore technical skills, but also my soft skills. That Customer Appreciation Gala was one of the most successful we had, and it actually allowed us to do significant sales on one of the major projects we were launching that day. But before I wrap up, there are just a few red flags I wanted to talk about, and here are a few pictures of that Client Appreciation Gala. Maybe we can move to the next slide. The first red flag is the flag of high visibility. High visibility entrepreneurs are a double. You risk taking your eye off the ball when your brand is bigger than your corporate brand, for instance. And a typical feature of high visibility entrepreneurs is that they have high internal visibility, which may also translate to high levels of external visibility. And some would argue that visibility is a great thing because it positions you to get involved in projects that are likely to be strategic, and so on and so forth. But watch out. The second red flag is the disillusion around the pace of change. Entrepreneurs tend to underestimate just how long it may take to change in a structured corporate environment. So frustration sets in, dashed expectations, you feel misunderstood, you feel not seen, not heard. And then the myth of clarity. We live in a VUCA world. VUCA worlds were created for entrepreneurs. This is how we thrive. I mean, I work in the banking sector now. This is the stuff that we're made up of. And then one I get a lot of questions on, managing up. Don't forget to help your own leader or boss achieve their own goals. Carry them along. Give them a sense of ownership. Humility is key. The realities of hierarchy and who calls the shots ultimately always comes to bite. And then one that I think is very interesting and a lot of people can relate. The risk of becoming a serial job hunter. I see the people who are laughing, they're in that bucket. A major red flag of unbridled entrepreneurship is the risk of becoming a serial job hunter. But entrepreneurship, like entrepreneurship, is a long game. If you go back to my point about process, think of your career like a map. There are no exact destinations. So in career 1, you can start to learn the art of collaboration. By role 2, you're tested on it, which further deepens your collaboration skills. By role 3, Your collaboration skills have been tried and tested. Now you can lead an impactful collaborative project. But how many of us actually stop to take stock of our growth and progress on the things that have worked for us? Notice something else about the box, how the cracks let in the light, right? That light is it's resilience, it's agility, it's entrepreneurial thinking. And then maybe you're asking yourself, when will the box eventually break? When will I start my own business? When will I quit? How long is this journey going to continue for? Corporate entrepreneurship is not just about outcomes and progress. It's like prayer. It's not intended for God. It's intended to change you. It's intended to change people. It's intended to change their perspectives. One day, you might smash the box and claim your prize, but for now, just learn to enjoy the process. It was Dr. Miles Monroe that said, "True legacy is in people, not just projects, programs, and buildings." And I thought I would end this presentation on my alternative view to corporate entrepreneurship by asking a very pertinent question. Why do we need this model of entrepreneurship today in our country? Many of you will be able to relate to the parallels with our country. Investing in and doing business in Nigeria is a long game, right? It's a long and painful game. We've seen a very real and live example of it recently on our coastline. Intrapreneurs understand this. Our big national corporate champions, the Dangotes, the Boas, are facing a dearth of talent. So creating opportunities as an entrepreneur will be absolutely key. And I would argue that corporate entrepreneurship provides a microcosm of what is possible at national level and in our public sector. In a high inflation, credit tight, high rate environment, the ability to solve problems in the face of scarcity and limited resources is absolutely key. So the entrepreneurship model is the most ideal for nation building. And since this is a platform, why not? Let's go back to the glass box. Look at it again. In that glass box, what do you see? Innovation within structure. Its purpose within service to a higher power. Its frictions, its cracks, but ultimately unity. Its brinkmanship, as Nigeria is so often wanting to do, but ultimately stability. Its scarcity, but ultimately ingenuity. Its raw talent, but ultimately the future. Its competition, but ultimately collaboration. It's a celebration of culture that never negates the rule of law. It's practice, process, and people and prayers that maybe, just maybe, will deliver results. If Nigeria was this box, all of us should be corporate entrepreneurs cracking it. Thank you.